shiny, so grand. Setting up our code by hand. Daytona makes it easy to see. Local dev made simple and free. Even joins us leading the way. Guiding spirits come and stay. With his help we never stray. In our code we find our play. Oh Daytona, light our fire. Building dreams we aspire. Local dreams set to inspire. Daytona takes us higher. Lines of code we start to weave. In this world we do believe. Daytona shining through the night. Local magic, pure delight. Ivan's wisdom lights the path. Steering clear of coding wrath. With his guidance we achieve. In our hearts we do believe. Oh Daytona, light our fire. Building dreams we aspire. Local dreams set to inspire. Daytona takes us higher. Lots of code we start to weave. In this world we do believe. Daytona shining through the night. Local magic, pure delight. Ivan's wisdom lights the path. Steering clear of coding wrath. With his guidance we achieve. In our hearts we do believe. Oh Daytona, light our fire. Building dreams we aspire. Local dreams set to inspire. Daytona takes us higher.
Hello and welcome back to the Rawkode Academy. I'm your host David Flanagan, also known across the internet as Rawkode. Today we continue our Rawkode live series where we take a look at future-facing cloud-native technologies to simplify your cloud-native journey. Today is no exception. We are joining let me try and find the words. I am being joined by the Daytona team to take a look at simplifying your development environments. Joining us today is Ivan. Hey man, how's it going?
Pretty good. Thank you. Great to have you. It's always fun to have these blurbs in the video so people know it's like real. It's not pre-recorded. So like everything that we're doing is live. Everything that we screw up, it happens. It's live. So it's great. I was just talking when we were before we got live. It's like I do like a demo a day at least. And then I was like at a huge conference, 1,000 people are watching and my demo broke. So, it is what it is. So it's live. So welcome everyone. Super happy to be here.
Yeah. As I've said previously, I've done over 432 of these and there's probably 900 errors at least. So those are what make it fun. Anyway, for anyone who's not familiar, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit of information on who you are and what you've been up to?
Sure. My name is Ivan, co-founder and CEO of Daytona. Did a bunch of things in my career. Probably what's relevant to the conversation that we're having right now is that the co-founding team of Daytona, which is about 15 months old now, was also the co-founding team of Code Anywhere. So Code Anywhere was as far as I fact-checked, I always say this a bit, the very first browser-based IDE ever in the world. And so we did that in 2009 before there was Web 2.0. Just to be clear, there was nothing you could really do in the browser. Then it was basically a white notepad and FTP server and whatnot, FTP connector. As Web 2.0 came out, we could do syntax highlighting and all these things in the browser. So we sort of were the first that started this whole journey into bringing, dev environments off the local host, or let's say at least trying to simplify them. Least successful before, hopefully much more successful this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, if we look at the landscape today in cloud native development with microservices and polyglot runtimes and languages and other services and databases from every other new startup vendor, like local environments just probably, in fact, they're not possible anymore. Depending on what magic people are trying to work out. But I think cloud-based environments are where we need to be, and I'm hoping that we can show people a really good way to do that today.
Yeah, I mean, so I was just gonna add on that like I feel that history has changed quite a bit. I mean, back in the day, there's back in the day, but like back in my day, we used IDEs, and the name basically meant integrated dev environment because you had like Eclipse or IntelliJ or Visual Studio and installed everything on there. And when you wrote code, you hit run and it worked because it had all the dependencies that you needed there for the most part. Whereas like fast forward today, because of everything we've done, microservices and whatnot, like you can't do these things or you can't have a prepackaged IDE for that. So basically most people use VS Code, which is just a text editor on steroids. And now the complexities of setting up the dev environment is off on you or us or me and whatnot. And so we're hoping with Daytona to get a bit of that feel and magic back where it's like as simple as it can be. And you just focus on the coding and let, offset all the dependencies to someone else.
Nice. I mean, I'm sold already, but anyway, we should still do the demo, I think. Now, I've got some questions for you, but I'm going to let Kunal hit in first because he beat me to the punch and it's relevant to what you said. He wants to know what conference you're going to next.
So what conference? I have not booked conferences. So to be fair, the last conference I was at was Shift in Croatia because I founded that one. It's not mine anymore, but I founded it. So I went. And there's so many conferences to go to. And I'm basically a conference junkie. It's just like trying to be heads down. That
you must be
said,
big for KubeCon though. Come on, right? You go to KubeCon?
Exactly. I was going to say like, I'll probably show up at KubeCon. Like we might not do anything, but I'll land and like hang out. So Kunal, I'll see you at KubeCon most likely. Yeah.
Nice. All right. What's your favorite programming language? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. So I'll answer this in a specific way. I'll say Daytona uses Go. And
the cloud native audience just give you a tick. So
yeah, so we use Go. And this is for the open source product. And for now, it's just a CLI tool. So everything's written in Go. It's just like one language. Go is super easy or, as can be. And it lets us, it's a standard in, or very commonly used in cloud native products or services that you'd find. So the type of person that will hopefully contribute or whatnot is already very familiar. And it lets us do a lot of things on the hardware level, which we have to manipulate to have these dev environments. So that's my answer, and I'll keep it at that.
All right. I mean, most people are used to me saying Rust 15,000 times in every episode, and I'm a big fan. Yeah. But I've got to be honest, I've been playing a lot with Zig lately, and there's a lot there too. So,
I mean, a lot of people when they ask me this is like, well, like Rust, like why aren't you guys using it and whatnot? And then it's like, I'll back to my old answer, but like, yeah, I don't want to open up that can.
It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. I love what Rust gives you, but I always feel like I'm like, why is this the case? Why do I need to jump through all of these hoops just to do that thing? And of course, it's because it's all these data risk protections and memory safety. Sometimes I just want to get stuff done. Anyway, I'm not getting into a rant today. That's for another time. All right. Cool. We've heard about you. You're maybe going to go to KubeCon, at least for a beer or two. What is Daytona?
So Daytona is we call it a dev environment manager. Some people use the term CDE, so cloud dev environment. But for us specifically, when we were thinking about Daytona and how to build it and why we actually got that, that's a whole interesting story on itself, how we decided to build this thing out. But when we did do our research before actually forming a company, I researched everyone that had mentioned remote dev environment or CDE on the internet. And so there's like this huge Notion table with like all these people. There's like 500 people on the list. And from there, you'll have like investors and founders and, users, engineering managers, whatnot. And what I also found from that is engineers that have built or are working on a similar product inside of their own company, because there's not, people say if you search like cloud development, there's a bunch of vendors. Yes, maybe, but actually to solve a problem for a large enterprise, there are very, very few. I'd say like maybe one. And so a lot of these companies had to build it. And that was interesting because I found that, obviously Google, Meta, Shopify, LinkedIn, Stripe, Palantir, like all these companies had built something similar internally. And I wanted to figure out like why, what has been the reason for that. And so I reach out to these people, half of them like reply and half of them, have a call like this with me. And I ask them, what are you building? What is the problem that you're solving? How many people are building it? Do the developers like it? And I found that some companies mandate it because of security reasons. Like everyone has to use these standardized dev environments, be it local, remote, whatever. And the ones that don't, like it's not mandated by the company, but you can choose to use it and choose not to use it. 80%, and this has been consistent over all these companies, 80% of developers actually use it. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like developers like this thing and enterprises are building this. The teams that are building it are anywhere from 4 people to like 30 people. So it's not an insignificant amount of cost of headcount that's actually building these things, which was like super for us. But what I was going to get to is the most interesting one for me was Shopify. And so the person that I talked to at Shopify told me the story about how they got to these dev environment, standardized remote dev environments. And so they started first with standardizing the local dev environments. And so what they would do is before, if you were a new hire, the engineering team or his team would take the laptop and then they'd install, configure everything for you so that when it was your first day of work, you can contribute to on day one, because everything was like set up for you, which was like pretty cool, especially when you have lots of developers. And what they noticed is that, and this is his words, not mine, that at one point, the cables connected to laptops were starting to melt because of the size of these machines that they had to now spin up and run. And so it's in one of my pitch decks. It's like, this person said that. And so they had to go out and build these remote dev environment systems because, the only way to do it now is like, here's an EC2 and go figure out how you're gonna get this up and running. And so they had to rebuild this whole automation that they had on the local machine. And they did it for the remote, and halfway building it, they figured out, oh, we've already done this before. And basically what they created, the output was what a developer sees now is they have the CLI tool, and I don't know the exact commands, so don't hold me to this, but it's basically like create dev environment remote or create dev environment local. Like it is the same flow for an engineer to spin it up on their local machine as it is to spin it up on the remote machine. So you as a developer don't have any difference. Like if you're doing like a front end app, super small, super like whatever, you're gonna do it local host, you don't care. But if it's like something large, have a bunch of services or whatever it may be, or like I'm just trying to help you out and I don't want to shut off my dev environment at my machine, I can just spin this up automatically. And what they built was basically the foundation of our first principle of Daytona. It is a lot of these companies their solution is a cloud remote dev environment for everything. Our thought process is we want all dev environments, and dev environments are like, as we mentioned at the beginning, like they're all over the place. People have different configurations, setups, locations. Sometimes it's on a box in their, in their basement. Sometimes it's on an EC2. Sometimes it's on a laptop. It can be everywhere. Can we unify all this so it always feels the same for you? And that is the principle of what Daytona is. So the idea is that you have one command, either Daytona create or a button create. Daytona does everything for you. We can run through what that is. And you always have the same output. You have a dev environment that it feels like it's localhost. It is localhost. It's proxy to localhost, no matter where it actually is. And that is what we built out. And we've built it out as an open source tool for the individual dev can, use it, runs it on localhost, point to an EC2, can do that, or DigitalOcean, whatever. And there's obviously an enterprise where, you install it, there's a whole cluster and, it manages all these things that enterprises are super interested on. Probably not the people here, but so that is what Daytona is. And I'm happy for you to dig deeper into those questions because obviously I haven't answered everything.
No, that was plenty of context. I think I'm with you now. I am curious though, when you say that you provision everything, do I get to use my own IDE?
Yes. Learning number one of Code Anywhere. So for code, when we were building Code Anywhere, there was no VS Code. Like that didn't exist, right? And the only way that we can give you a dev environment or access to it then, because there was no VS Code and there was no remote in VS Code, which exists in VS Code or also exists in JetBrains now and whatnot. Remote dev support. So we had to build our own IDE. So we've built like 5 versions of a browser-based IDE, essentially VS Code. It's not on the level of VS Code. Obviously, we're not Microsoft and didn't have the budget to do that and, the plugins and whatnot. But the learning was definitely, as a developer, I don't want to use your, your IDE, whatever you built, whatever you think. No, give me, my VS Code, give me my JetBrains, give me my, IntelliJ or PHP Storm, Cursor is all the rage now. You can use Cursor. It doesn't matter. Whatever you feel like using, you can use. The idea is that there's zero learning curve. It's everything that you've done historically would be the same, but just easier.
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned it because obviously there's 2 types of developers. Ones that just don't care what their tools are, and then some that have spent decades handcrafting. And I feel like I've spent decades handcrafting my tool chain.
So what do you use?
But I worked for one enterprise. Well, right now I am using VS Code because I just don't think you can beat that extension ecosystem. It is huge. I've got one eye on Zed, but I don't want to get into it. The way it's attractive, I run Nexus on my desktop. And Zed does its own plugin acquisition, which does not work with Nexus, so I lose all my LSPs. Okay. But I'm ready to jump to Zed once it works. Anyway, as I was saying, I worked for one large enterprise. I've worked for a couple of large enterprise companies, but only one that specified we had to use a CDE, a common development environment. And that's what it was back in the day. This is like 2012. A virtual machine, a vagrant virtual machine that I had to spin up on my laptop in GUI mode. So I then got presented this Fedora box with IntelliJ, with its lockdown extensions and keyboard shortcuts. I couldn't change anything, and everybody worked that way. And I swear I quit that job after about 10 days. It was like, no, sorry. Because at that time I was a Vim fanboy. I was all over Vim. It was horrible. But even just GUIs in a VM is not a nice experience. So
no, it's terrible. I have to say one of our value props is, and I'm saying it's very much from a technical perspective, is that there's a lot of companies that use VDI, so virtual desktop interfaces, because everything has to be like in lockdown and whatever. Just the latency of streaming my IDE or editor, like I'm not even going to talk about like disabling all these things, but just that latency is enough to, want to go kill myself. Like it's like I don't want to do that. And can we provide, the thing is like, can we provide that same level of safety, security, while as a developer, it doesn't feel like I want to shoot myself? Like, can we get to that place in the world, please? And so that is also one of the things that we try to do with all of this, for sure. So that's, since you brought it up, I wanted to add on that 100%.
Nice. Well, I think I'm about ready to see Daytona in action, and I think you're going to lead us through a stellar demo today, right?
Let's hope so. Let's kick it off. Yeah. Sharing screen. Let's share the entire screen right here. So do we see my screen? We see my screen. Awesome. Do. Screen is here. Great. Just like to start up really quickly. Everything I'm going to show you is part of Daytona open source, which means like everyone can use it, take it, fork it, do whatever you want. It's Apache 2.0, so like actual open source. I know there's like discrepancies on what people think, so you can do whatever you want with it.
You've not released the Daytona business source license yet, no?
Yeah, no, we haven't gone that route. Yeah, we still. I have to say that when we built out the enterprise product first, and then the open source afterwards. And we actually did it second because we wanted to be really sure about how to split these products in a way that we don't have to like make up licenses later on, pull back licenses later on, and whatever. And so what we discovered, and it took us about 9 months of figuring it out. Of this out, and it's partially legal, partially product, partially vision, whatever. And basically what we decided to do is that everything that is interesting to a single developer, all of that is part of this repository, and it's Apache 2.0 and it'll always be Apache 2.0. Everything that you as a developer don't care about, audit logs, spinning up clusters, monitoring things, disabling, like all of that is in a different repository, completely proprietary, and that's what we sell to the enterprise. So I really strongly believe that we will never have to go to a point where we, touch these licenses because of the way we split it up between a user and potentially a buyer. So we were very scared of that. There's a lot of things going on in the market right now, or the last few days. Anyway, Daytona, to spin it up, to install it, it's fairly simple. There's this, I'm on Mac. So basically, I'm not going to install it. I'm going to hold up real quick.
I will say that I went through the docs for getting started, and I see Nick's instructions, and it made me very happy. So
didn't it? Yeah, it's in there. It's in there. So we're also, I can explain a bit later. Basically, you just hit this. I'll install it. I already have installed, so I won't go through it, but it just like automatically installs everything. There's nothing. And then when you hit the Daytona command, you have this little sort of terminal UI that can like walk you through the most needed commands. And so to get up and running, basically all you have to do is this one command, which is Daytona create. And I've already connected my GitHub and I connected some providers and whatnot. But so I'm going to pick a GitHub repository. As we said, it will be just a hello world, nothing too complicated, but it has enough to explain everything that's going on. So what I do, it's the workspace name. So what I've done right now when we're building Daytona, we were actually thinking about, can we make Daytona work from a logical perspective, very much like an Uber, and like, bear with me one sec, or even a Waymo, right? Because today you can hit a button on your phone. It's basically where I am, where I'm going, and what car is going to take me. And it takes you, right? It's like all automatic in the real world. And even with a Waymo, there's no driver. Like that is the world we live in right now. And today, like getting a dev environment automated seems like a harder task, which is like beyond me. And so when we're thinking about this, it's like, how do we do it in a similar fashion? So when I want to spin up a dev environment, it is, where is my project? So the Git repository where it's at. Where do I want to run this dev environment? Like, is it on my local host, DigitalOcean, GCP, wherever it may be? And what IDE do I want to use, right? So I've set a repository. I'm now going to pick, right now I'm going to hit local. I'll do remote later on. My local, it'll spin up a Docker. And the IDE I've already set. So it'll just open up VS Code. And I can show you a cursor afterwards if you want. And so what Daytona does is always the same with a few variations. And I'll get to Nix in 1 second as well. So what it does is it will spin up if it's a remote, it'll spin up a VM on a cloud. But if it's local, there's no read for that. Then it spins up a container or micro VM inside of those. So on localhost, just like a Docker. It will then check out the repository inside of that. It will read through the repository. And if you have a configuration file, right now it supports Docker file and dev container, but we have in testing. So it's already done, just showing you that's how long it took. We have in testing that we can also read Nix configuration files. And so if you have any of these configuration files, it will spin up everything automatically for you. And so now that it's up and running, I could have done -C to get it up right away. The project is here. It's been up for 1 minute. It's going to open VS Code, my local VS Code, obviously, because I'm not doing anything else.
So prefixing it with Daytona is just telling it how to open a remote dev container, right?
It's opening a remote dev. Even if it's local, it's a remote, right? Because it's in your Docker. And so what's interesting, because this project has a dev container configuration, it is off to the races right away. Sorry, I put yarn instead of yarn. Apologies. And so my project is up and running, hopefully. Like, demos should be working. It says hello world. Here it is. Okay, it's up and running. So there's more to this, and I'm just going to pause 1 second. So what it did was it checked out the repository, it read the configuration, it built the entire dev environment so that I can come up and running. And I only had one sort of command to get it up and running right away. Also, it is on localhost. But what's interesting, if it was remote, and I can show you that, it'll be also localhost. But one thing that we also have inside of Daytona, and this is running on my Docker. If I do Daytona forward, what's the port number? I was here, port 5173.
I think so, yeah.
5173 -- public. And if I do this, basically what you'll get is a QR code, and you can scan it, or you can type the whole URL, but it should be the QR code here.
I'm getting my scanner.
Yeah, so here you go. So get your scanner out and scan this QR code if you can.
We've never had a QR scan before in over 400 episodes. Holy sweet.
Yeah, this worked. Did you open it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what happened now is it adds a reverse proxy, even if I'm behind a firewall, connected to whatever, and you basically have your preview environment. So if I go down here, sorry, let's change this. Let's change this real quick and say David. And also everyone in the audience can do this if anyone was looking at it right now.
Hey, that
And
refreshed in real time.
it refreshed on your phone in real time, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what it does, so what Daytona does, some people ask me like, oh, don't I have this in Docker? Well, Docker is missing, some people also called it, and I don't say that this is what we are, like a thin layer around Docker. It is all the things that you need for a dev environment that are missing from just having a Docker container. It actually works on a machine because it'll work for everyone, everywhere. You can share it. Like all these things are here, and it works no matter on what infrastructure. And so this is going to take a bit of time, but I'll just show you this. So this is my DigitalOcean, my account. And so if I do Daytona, I'll do Daytona create the same repository. Daytona create GitHub. This is going to take a bit of time so we can talk about things, but I just want it to go load in the background.
Yeah, don't worry, I've got questions.
So same project, Hello World 2, and I'm going to spin it up because we're in Europe both right now, in DigitalOcean Amsterdam. And so what is this going to do? It's going to do everything I did right now, but it's also going to spin up a VM or droplet in DigitalOcean. But I will also have the same, it'll also be all localhost. So it'll be the same commands. I don't care where it is as a user. I can also share it to you. Although it's a public, I could have done it anyway. It'd be a little bit of work. But it's like out of the box, same feel, same everything, no matter like where it's running. And we have this for EC2, and we have this for GCP, and we have this for all these different things. And so as you can see, so it's right here, it's loading. And so this has nothing to do with Daytona now. It's like it takes whatever time it takes for a VM to actually get up and running. So yeah, I'm going to pause here and let you now ask questions while this is sort of spinning.
Good, because I've got stuff in my head. First, just because the DO stuff is right in front of us, you mentioned earlier that once the VM is provisioned, you're then running a micro VM, something like Firecracker, and then running the application inside of that. Do I have the option to run multiple of those micro VMs inside of a single machine? Or is it you get one host?
Let me pause. Right now, the way it's created, the enterprise product does exactly what you said right now. Okay. The open source sort of, we have to get to where we have to get. So this version right now, it's one actual droplet per micro VM. Basically, the micro VM the reason it's there is that it abstracts all the Daytona things that are running in that machine so that you don't see that in the workspace. You don't have to think about that at all. Yeah. You can SSH with root access into the VM and then see that stuff, but basically you don't need to see that stuff because you actually don't care. To answer your question, will we support to spin up multiple workspaces inside of that so you can orchestrate things? Yes. And that's something that's on very soon roadmap, but it's not there right now.
Okay. Also, just because that was fresh in my head, we can now go back to that first example that you ran locally. Now, I noticed that there's a dev container directory here. I'm assuming that's what Daytona is using to work out how to build this project.
Exactly. The only thing that for Daytona is something that doesn't happen on every single repository is that it checks for a dev container type configuration file. So if there's a dev container, everyone is magical, right? But obviously not all of them have that. And so we're expanding the types of configuration files that we will support. So as mentioned, dev container, Nix as well is going to be supported. Flux, because why not? Because it's there. Dev file and Docker file. So those are the ones that we plan to support because those are all basically open standards, which will enable us to support even more of these. What's going to happen? So a very hint for today, it's not core to Daytona's product, but this week we're going to launch a open source project. Hopefully everyone can help us contribute to this. It is a AI, well, of course, everything's AI, tool that will create these types of files for any repository. There's still work to be done. It works on a large number of them, but the idea is that because we depend on that heavily, we'd like that to be a solved problem in the world. So then we're creating this and hopefully the world can help us get to a place where this is not an issue. So every single repository in the world can be runnable right to start. Note that if there is not a dev container or a Nix or whatever inside, Daytona falls back on a default workspace, which has everything, like everything's installed in that one, so that it almost works automatically. Like I've had people like test it out and say, oh, there's no dev container and it works. Well, yes, because like it's a huge machine and it's sort of just for the experience part for that to happen. I'm just showing you the screen. In the meantime, the droplet finished. Now it's going through all the steps that it would have gone through on the local host as well. Back to your questions.
Okay. So I don't know if this is going to lean into something that Daytona doesn't support yet, but I'll throw it at you anyway. Everything I do is in one mono repository. So does Daytona give me any way to either say I'm working in this mono repository, but just this particular service? Can it handle a mono repository? Like, what is the best practice there?
So yeah, so in the sense that everything's one repository, that's the easiest for us.
All right.
The issues that we come up with are with multiple repositories. So Daytona supports right now that you can have multiple repositories in the same machine, and that works right now. What we are working on right now, that was my call before this right now, is how do we make a world where we don't complicate this simple flow, but that you can actually have a workspace, a micro VM, a pod, a whatever for every one of your repositories, and that they're all sort of connected together so that you can have that experience. That's something that we're working on like literally right before this call, but it's not in there.
Okay, but what if the challenge with my mono repository is that I don't have a top level dev container, and in fact I have nested dev containers all throughout that repository? Is that something?
So you can pick which one you want to run.
Okay.
If that's the question. You can pick which one. Yeah, you can pick, oh, I don't want this. If I have multiple, so let's say Astro is a good repository. They have like 100 dev containers inside of that. You can pick which one you want to actually spin up, which one you want to use, right?
And is it possible, I guess I don't know how, like, okay, let's strap in. So you've got this Firecracker virtual machine. Is it possible for you, if it's like you've cloned my mono repository, say it's quite large, I don't want to clone that every single time I switch between workspaces or packages within that mono repository. Can I say I want to go from my web app to my backend API now and reload that without shutting everything down and back up again?
There's no, but there's a way to do that very fast. So we have something called prebuilds, which is essentially what it does. It caches the build of a repository. So what that means is that you can create a build for any of the branches or any of the dev containers or whatnot. And then you can spin up different workspaces of the same with the different builds. And because the build's cached, it's like super fast to get up. It's like way faster than what we're doing right now.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, let's talk about that QR code thing then. I mean,
Sure.
Did you build your own proxy? Are you leveraging other open source?
Headscale. So it's an open source Tailscale. Headscale, it's called.
Right.
Just kudos to them for like making that. And so we were using them as a reverse proxy to be able to do this. The reason that we want to do this as well is because, creating Code Anywhere, which is a browser-based SaaS cloud IDE product, there's a lot of those that exist right now. And we wanted to offer that sort of value without having any cost. So basically what we have here is the same feel. There's also a GUI will be coming soon, just for some people want it. We did CLI first. And so you have that same feel as if you're going through like a code spaces. So let's just use GitHubs, right? It's the same. It's like, oh, pick my repo, pick my ID, enter. You do all these things. You can share a URL. It's like it's running in the cloud, but it's not. So we wanted that whole experience to be sort of packaged inside of Daytona.
Nice. Well, it looks like your DigitalOcean one's working, right?
It is. It looks like it is. Let's do Daytona code. Let's try this out. So this is the one running on DigitalOcean. You can see that here. You can see here, this one's running local. This one's running on DigitalOcean. So I'm going to open this up. It's going to open up a new VS Code. And we should go through the same flow, even though it's running, in Amsterdam, which is not on my machine. Obviously, some things might be slightly slower. We'll see. Shouldn't be. Here we go. Yes. All right. Up and running. And so same flow terminal. And I'll do, this time I won't yarn I did it right. Did I? And so what you're seeing right now is that it's also on my local host. So it's still running on my local host. And for me, all the commands I write are localhost, even though it's running on DigitalOcean. And also what you'll notice is that it moved the port from 5173 to 5174 because Daytona saw that the port was already used and it used the next one that was free. So it says 5173, but I'm already using it for my other project. So it automatically did that. So I don't have to worry as well. And then you get that same sort of, if I want to do Daytona forward 5174 -- public, I'll get the QR code here and you should be able to work as well. All right. You can scan it and see if it works.
I think at this stage, I'm pretty convinced it's going to work.
Yeah, even if it doesn't, I think it's good. Like, it's like, yeah. Loading, not loading.
Loading, or at least trying to
load. At least trying to load, yeah. So we'll see. Huh. Wait, am I on the right one? No, here it is. Might not. We'll double check why that happened. But in any case, everything up until that was the same. And that should be the same as well. But anyway, so what I was going to show, the most important part here was that it's also proxy to localhost. It moves the port if it needs to, because I was still using the other one. If I'd killed this service that was running on my local, it would have been to the 5173 it was supposed to, not automatically moved it. So I, as a developer, like, there's no difference outside of like snag, maybe what happened here for a second. But other than that, everything should feel the same no matter where it is. And so even if I spin up now on an EC2, or if I spin it up on like a physical, server somewhere, it always feels the same to me as a developer.
Okay. Very interesting. So I like that it supports multiple providers. I can work locally if I want. It seems to solve that problem that most people have in a Mac, where, you're not syncing files across the network here because you're cloning the repository on the remote box, which is very clever. So I'm curious to see, do you have, let's look at that dev container.json. Is there anything interesting in there first before I take us away from it?
I mean, this one's like super simple. There's nothing.
It's just an image and install yarn or something. Okay.
Yeah. Install yarn, and there's a Docker file. In the Docker file, it's just like, it's a very simple one. I mean, we can spin up more complex ones, but even VS Code itself, it can do that for you. So I don't think there's that much magic in that. But what we do is we pre-build it for you and sort of deliver it done. Or we build it for you, but we can also pre-build it afterwards for you. So it's automatically done. And you always know that it works because that machine that it's running on is always the same, right? It's not on my local machine, which sometimes it's a Mac, sometimes it's a Linux, sometimes it's, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that works pretty well. I mean, I definitely want to try and kick the tires on it with some sort of Nextflake or DevEnv or Flux and have it run its magic that way. So.
It's on our issues to support that. We've tried it. It works and so when we publish it, I'd absolutely love for you to kick the tires. The interesting part about all of these, when you look at it, the logic behind how Flux or Nix and Dev Container work, it is the logic behind them is quite similar. So it was super easy for us to basically go out and build a version, a builder for each of these. We call them builders.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is something you have tackled yet or something you plan to tackle in the future, but there are sometimes very annoying circumstances where even running in local dev requires access to some sort of secrets or credentials. Does Daytona provide any framework or hooks to be able to get those into the remote machine?
So you can forward secrets into the machine. You can do that. It depends on where. You can give me more explanations. You can for the most simple problems that you have, but I don't know if you have anything more specific.
I mean, maybe this is just something that, if I had a flake, I would just have in my dependencies that I need the 1Password CLI or I need in physical, and I have to then, when I'm in the machine, provide that credential. But maybe there's a way, because what I'm seeing here, right, is what Daytona seem to be doing is taking something that is normally cumbersome, finicky, annoying, and putting on a very nice developer experience to the point where it was one or two commands and it just worked. So that I'm now looking at, okay, well, what are the other frustrations that I have when I'm trying to work with development environments? And maybe there's you can sprinkle some of that Daytona sauce or whatever to make secrets acquisition easier in this remote environment. And I'm not sure what that would be, but
yeah, I would actually very much invite you and everyone watching, if you have any of those ideas, just like open an issue, please, on our GitHub repository, and we'll definitely take that out, look at those, because you couldn't. I mean, historically, when we started, you couldn't forward your environment variables or whatever you wanted to inside the machines or inside the workspaces. Now you can. So, like, as we progress with the product, so the open source product, we launched it in March. It's now September, so it's still a fairly short time. It's still not a stable version, to be clear. Like, there's breaking changes in the updates that we do. Just to be clear, like, it's still not there. And my engineering team is basically, I was saying, can we get to like a stable, because of whatever reason? They're like, no, like, we can't do that yet. We want the freedom to be able to move. We do 2 launches a week on the open source version. So it's like, there's a lot of iteration and things happening. And so basically what we want to do is take away all of these paper cuts that you have in a dev environment. And there's so many of them because there's so many different dev environments. And they're not probably going to be all your paper cuts, but you're going to have 2 of them. I'll have 2, another will have 10, whatever it may be. And so can we sort of like take all these paper cuts and remove them from the world? That is what we want to achieve.
Okay, I like it. Is there anything else that you think would be interesting to show us before we jump back to big face mode?
I think that, like, for the demo, I'd like pause it here. I can show like what the graphic interface looks like and what other things we can do. But I feel that because the idea of dev environments for people is like, why do I have to do it? Like, I have, I can do it myself. I can do whatever. I feel that this leaves the most impact, hopefully. And it gives enough that, like, oh, can I try it? Can I have that same experience with my project, right? And if you don't, I'd love to know why. Like, open an issue and we'll basically take care of it as soon as we can, because we want to tackle all these issues. And the ones that you mentioned as well, in the sense of, can I have multiple workspaces basically running inside? That's something that's probably the most common question that we get from people that we talk to, is like, can we get that part in there as well? And so it's not as simple, it's not straightforward, but yes, you can. And we hope to solve that for everyone as well.
Yeah, I just think that opens up that interesting approach where I can either spin up a slightly bigger box and repurpose it and save some time from the provisioning versus having to shut it back down and spin it up. But it's certainly not, it's not a deal breaker, because what you're showing is that you can put a nice user experience, a good, nice developer experience on top of what is otherwise a relatively painful problem. So,
but can we? But still, we want to get that one as well. Like, there's no reason. Again, I'm using the self-driving car analogy. Like, if we can get that, like, there's no reason in the world why we can't solve your problem. Like, there's no reason, right? I think there's just not enough. There was not enough of a pain for a solution historically, because dev environments were not as complicated historically as they are today.
All right. Well, we have a question from someone named Thank You in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I work with Red Hat OCP and ARO clusters. I'm not sure what those is. It OCP that I'll come back to that in a minute. With observability and monitoring, can Daytona make my life easier? So I guess what they're curious about is, can they use is OCP Kubernetes? I mean, I don't even know.
I don't know.
I mean, I think OCP was that project that tried to do Kubernetes with no worker nodes and get a control plane. Maybe Thank You can jump back into the comments and let us know. I have no idea what ARO clusters are. I'm so sorry. But yeah, let's talk.
Let's talk more, but if we can get more details on the question, we'll try to answer it.
Yeah. All right. Ravi is saying, so if we install Daytona with Nix, does it still depend on containers?
So it depends on the question. So if we're talking about, do we use Nix as a configuration? Yes, it still uses containers. It's just the way that we architect these things. I know that Nix, the way it works, like, you don't have to have containers on your machine, but the way we've done it is we create an isolated container every single time, regardless, just to keep the product as is. You as a user don't actually see the difference. You shouldn't see the difference, but the answer is yes, we do use that. And if we're talking about the VMs as well, it'll go up and spin up VM specifically right now with DigitalOcean, and then it'll build using the Nix configuration file, and each one will be its own separate, even though I understand it could be on the same one. Yeah.
All right. Thank you said it's just a Kubernetes-based Red Hat product. So maybe let's talk about, I mean, I'm assuming Daytona could be deployed to Kubernetes, and can it provision to Kubernetes as a provider?
So there's two answers to this. Yes, we will. There's an up and coming provider for Kubernetes. So instead of using like a Docker container, it can use Kubernetes and spin that up. So that's up and coming. And that sort of falls into the same, at least for us, the same problem as how do we interface multiple workspaces, sandboxes, whatever, inside a dev environment. Because if you're looking at it from a UI perspective, it is very much similar. So you have like one dev environment that has multiple of these pods or whatever. And so, yes, there is a Kubernetes provider coming up, but we're just aligning how that's going to work with all these different things. So that's not specific for each of the different providers.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to pop us back over here. If anyone watching has, I always forget about those little animations. If anyone watching has any more questions, drop them in. You've got a few more minutes to sneak them in. Let's talk about what's next for Daytona. So you open sourced this a little under a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
You're solving common developer, or at least simplifying developer experience for getting developer environments. What's next, and what's your like North Star? Where do you want to get to?
So where we want to get to is hopefully be a way of work, because it is an open source free tool. Hopefully every developer in the world like uses a Daytona command versus like whatever they're doing right now and all the variations of that. That is like what we hopefully to achieve at one time. But even more than that, and I have to sort of add on it a bit, just like aligning where the world is, there is a lot of, and I'll take a step back before that. So we launched support for Cursor last week or the week before that. And so why we did that, it was like actually very interesting on why people looked at it. And when you look at all the launches, it's probably one of the highest. The reason is, I don't know if you saw this, the meme on Twitter or X, whatever, of like we don't need, like developers are gonna like go away because we have AI, and then you have like someone in an iMessage sharing, oh, I made this application, which is not a developer, and they said show me, and they send localhost 3000. Basically, I don't know if you saw that. It's like a meme. It was all over the internet when Cursor raised their last round. And so as you saw with Daytona, there's like a QR code which you actually show your thing. And so we felt that it was really interesting that we support Cursor, because you can actually get a solution to that problem. Like an AI creates whatever or assists you, and then you can preview it to something. And that got a bunch of interest, and a lot of people using Cursor. I think it's been out the support for 2 weeks, and it's by far our number 2 IDE. So it's VS Code and Cursor, like halfway there, which is quite interesting. The other thing, while we're thinking about all that, is what does the future look like in general for human and AI developers, be it fully autonomous or being just code assist or whatever. And it seems, I've been testing out a lot of these. So All Hands, Devin AI, and all these others, like fully autonomous ones. And what's interesting for them is if you have fully autonomous one, it takes them time to do things. Like it's not instant, right? If you want to create a complex product, whatever it might be, it's going to take the AI time. Like they might know, quote unquote, know everything. They might not. I'm not going to get into that argument at all. That's a whole conversation on its own. But it does take time to get something done. And so if it takes time to get something done, if you're running that on your local machine, and if that is your full compute, like you can't do other things. You basically have to go have coffee and wait for the thing to do something.
Yep.
For me, that doesn't make sense. Like the way it should work is like, oh, like, AI, here's a DigitalOcean or EC2, like go do your thing. And I can spin up 10 of them because I'm doing 10 different things. And I also want to build something on my own because I'm doing something, or I want to check out the repo that the AI has built and I want to do that. And so what does a dev environment look like, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, where both human and AI are creating code. What is the overlap? What is the difference? And so those are things that we're testing out and playing with. It's not an exact answer to your question. Like I don't always like, oh, we're going to do this, because the whole market, as we see, is like fairly new and changes every day. But I feel that there's going to be an even larger need for these standardized and larger, dev environments running somewhere else, because of the sort of tailwinds of AI in there. So there's a lot of things, not saying we're not becoming an AI company per se, we're not doing anything of that, but what infrastructure is needed to run this stuff, basically.
Very cool. Have you used Cursor? I'm just curious now.
Yeah, I have.
Is it good? I haven't.
I mean, it's here. I mean, I've used Cursor.
I mean, their selling point, right, is that they scan your whole code base instead of just being pinched to like a single file. But I haven't.
Yeah, it does. You can do things in English, or in any other language, actually, which is interesting. Like you can do it in French or German or Chinese or whatever, and it does. So basically, I've done this demo and done other demos with Cursor as well, where basically you say, "Oh, find the hello world that shows up when I run the project, and change it to hello David." And it'll go through and say, "Oh, it's this file. It's on this line. Would you like me to change it?" You say yes, and it does it. So it's like it's pretty cool for those things. I very much believe that AI is not in a place where it's like, oh, go build me an app and I'm going to like make money off this app. I don't think it's even close to that there. But those types of things, like, yeah, it's like super convenient. You don't have to like search or do anything. It's just like, go do it. And it does it. So that's great.
So you're not going to be in the business of, when people open issues on the open source Daytona project, of having Cursor then go implement it, ship a pull request and merge it? Not quite yet.
I don't like, maybe for the simple ones. There's a lot of people that I've talked to a lot of companies that are building variations of AI agents, autonomous and like assisted. And there's a lot of them that still use humans. A lot of them. There are some that also use. So there's startups that do exactly what you said. Is like, oh, there's a pull request, and then you sort of assign the AI. It goes out. It spins up a VM somewhere. It runs. It does all these things. But I've also seen ones that do that, and then a human actually looks at the code, sort of fine tunes that, and then submits a PR. So I've seen those happening as well. Fully autonomous, they exist, but it's also a question of like, how good is it? I can't use it for a lot of things that we're doing, but it's also, and you'll probably know this as well, where it's AI does a lot of, or AI, I actually don't really like that word AI for what this is right now. I feel like AI is something like AGI is more AI, but anyway, semantics. What I was going to say is that AI is really good at doing things that we have done as humans, before. So if you're going to create a CRUD app, like that's easy. It's going to go do that for you. Like anyone can do that. You just, search the internet, how to do it, whatever. But if you're doing something that has not generally been done or not in the public, and if we're trying to fine tune and optimize, these machines, and then, sticking multiple machines in one machine in the way that we're doing, like it's not going to give you anything really useful in the sense of like an end-to-end solution. Obviously in like assistance, when you're like typing things and it's trying to help you, it'll do those, but actually making something complex that the world has not seen or not seen in public, it's not going to do that very well.
All right, awesome. Well, I will say thank you first and foremost for building a great open source project. I feel that the developer management environment space has been littered with proprietary software for far too long, and it's nice to see a bit of young, fresh blood come in and shake that up with open source. I also appreciate the changelogs, which are shipping far quicker than I can keep up with them. But that level of transparency into what you're doing as a company and a product and an open source project is invaluable. So again, lots of thank yous for you and your team and what you're doing. Any final words before we say goodbye?
Just very much a thank you. This is our first open source project. We've never done it ourselves. Obviously, we've consumed other ones, and we're trying. So if anyone has any comments of like, oh, we're supposed to show this or do this, we're trying to, like, the roadmap is in there. As you said, the changelog is in there. All the issues, everything's very, very transparent, and we're trying to do that, even though, it is a venture-backed company trying to do something. But this section of what we've built should be as pure as it can be open source. And so if anyone has any, comments or suggestions, we're all there. Also in Slack, we have a fairly large, there's like 2,000 people, whatever, in our Slack. Happy to have people join that as well and share with our comments and tell us what we're doing wrong or what we're doing great. Like, we welcome all comments.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for guiding us through that demo. And to everyone watching, thank you for spending your evening, morning, or afternoon with us. We'll see you all next time.
Say goodbye to friends from far and near. Rawkode life has brought us here. Cloud native, learning, taking flight. Together we shine in the night. Every session, every talk, building bridges as we walk. Knowledge shared with everyone underneath the rising sun. Let's celebrate, learn cloud native, hand in hand we innovate. Rawkode Academy we grow, together we rise.